Hello and welcome back to the GB Fantasy Football channel. In today's video, it's going to be my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 15 deadline. Of course, Game Week 14 has thrown up a lot of surprises, a lot of rotation, but we'll get into that in the video. Without further ado, let's crack on with the content. As mentioned in the introduction, this week has seen a lot of rotation in our players, a lot of missed out points in my own personal team, and as I'm sure many of you have missed out on a few points as well. Now, thank you very much for the support on the previous episodes. It's greatly appreciated. The channel is going in the right direction, and I'm thankful for every single one of you who have subscribed so far. If you haven't, there's over 70% of you. Go down below, smash the subscribe button. We are on the road to 1,500 subscribers. It's completely free, doesn't cost a single penny. And also, if you do enjoy today's content, smash the thumbs up button. 100 is the target on all Sun Dream Team videos. Now, the first segment on today's video is injuries. They're continually piling up this time of year, and despite being ever present, certain teams such as Crystal Palace are slowly starting to be affected. The team that we'll start off with is Arsenal. William Saliba was scheduled to be back a few weeks ago. The manager said days away. He said the same with Leandro Trossard, but Saliba has still yet to turn up in an Arsenal shirt. Defensive options are very slim across the ground, especially with Calafiori being banned against Wolves, so it looked like Lewis Skelly. Nketiah being taken off after just an hour against Club Brugge was quite telling. Goes to show that maybe there's a bit more reliability upon him with regards to minutes that he needs to play. Ben White, who's played a lot of minutes at right back, having been injured for a lot of the campaign, and also Jurrien Timber. He travelled with the Arsenal squad at the weekend, against Club Brugge in midweek, but wasn't named in the matchday squad. Apparently, Timber and Calafiori picked up big knocks against Aston Villa, but Calafiori was allowed to be on the bench. Timber wasn't in the right physicality to be there. I'm not sure whether he will come back at the weekend. Of course, Timber is very highly owned. I think, in fact, he is the most highly owned defender on the game currently. So for him to miss out in the week, there was a lot of Arsenal clean sheet points left on the table. Gabriel Jesus returned after an 11-month layoff. Got injured in January against Man United, ruptured his ACL, and it was good to see him back in an Arsenal shirt. And also, Gabriel is still out injured, we believe, until the new year for Arsenal. On to Crystal Palace, Daniel Munoz, a player that many of us have had in our teams throughout the campaign so far. Quality going forward, picks up those clean sheets, normally plays 90 minutes of every game for Crystal Palace, but he missed out last week for a swollen knee. It's come out in the news since that he's going to require surgery, out for between 4 to 6 weeks at least, so he will be a sell in our teams. Ismail Assar picked up the ankle injury a few weeks back, I believe it was against Manchester United. Won't play again for Crystal Palace until after AFCON has finished in January. So slowly but steadily, the ever-present Crystal Palace assets are picking up those injuries, and it was always going to be this way. These 90-plus minutes that they're playing every game, such a small squad, they just need to be out on the pitch every single time. And I do feel like Crystal Palace in January will bring in quite a few reinforcements. On to Liverpool, Mohamed Salah, of course, after his outburst last week, it doesn't look like he will play, not injury related as such, but more reliability and availability related. He won't play for Liverpool before AFCON, it doesn't look like anyway. Whether he'll play after AFCON is still yet to be seen. On to Chelsea, Fofana took a stud to the face midweek. He started the game, looked quite well, quite good to be fair. Didn't look too great, in fact. They stood to the eye, couldn't recover from it. He does have a chance of being available for the weekend, and Chelsea look a lot better at the back when it's Fofana and Chalobah playing centre halves. It'll be either Reece James or Malo Gusto at right back, with potentially Reece James dropping to the bench, having a rest. Of course, he can't play too many games in a row, and Caicedo, I don't think he's quite back from his ban yet. He's got at least a game to go. So that Chelsea defence is missing their midfield general in front of them as well. But Fofana picking up yet another injury. I think if it wasn't for these little niggling bits, we would be looking at him for our teams. Yes, he does miss the odd game, but he does pick up some points as well. And that Chelsea defence is a lot more stable than many people do believe. And finally, on to Newcastle. Yoane Wissa made his long return, if you want to put it that way, long awaited debut for Newcastle. Came on in the 93rd minute. Apparently, he's been battling illness all week. He came on for Voltemada, I believe. And I do think that Newcastle lineup is starting to get a lot more options. Of course, you've got Vissa and Voltemada up front. You've got Murphy, you've got Barnes. You've got Jacob Ramsey, I believe it is, who could play out on that side. You've got Anthony Gordon, who can play on the wings as well. You've got Alanga. There's lots of options coming into that Newcastle team, and that's just in the front line. We spoke about it in the big differential video when we were speaking about Bruno Guimaraes. The options in midfield, of course, you've got Jacob Ramsey, you've got Lewis Marley, who once again got on the score sheet. You've got Joelinton, who is currently nursing a groin issue. Whether he will be available to play in the time where Derby still yet to be seen. And also Nick Pope could potentially be back for that Sunderland game. Initially, it was the Manchester United game on Boxing Day, but news has come out that Pope is potentially available for that game this weekend. I actually do think he might go back in. Aaron Ramsdale has yet to keep a clean sheet, and we know what Eddie Howe is like with his favourites: Dan Burn, Joelinton, Nick Pope. It was Kieran Trippier as well in that little bracket. He has his favourites, and when his favourites are available, they tend to be put straight back in despite what their form has said. So that is the injury news for, well, ahead of game week 15, that is, for all these teams. These are strictly European teams, but of course, the bracket is now slowly opening up after this game week, and that will be intriguing as well. Moving on to the biggest price rises of the week going into that game week 15 deadline. Of course, budget building is a massive part of this game normally, with players such as Cole Palmer not necessarily firing on all cylinders, and Daniel Munoz and Gabriel, both the highest owned once upon a time and highest valued defenders in the game, not currently available for their teams. Budget isn't necessarily the biggest thing that we're looking at going into the game week 15 deadline and beyond, I'd say, until about game week 20. The biggest risers going into this deadline: Martinelli of Arsenal did, of course, score a fantastic goal in the Champions League in midweek, curled it right into the top corner. Ekitike and Andy Robertson of Liverpool. Robertson, lots of rotation risk at left back with Kirkes. Same with Ekitike, unfortunately. But maybe Ekitike does start on that left hand side. I know they played a kind of diamond in midfield that consisted of Curtis Jones, Szoboszlai, McAllister and Gravenberch, with Ekitike and Isak. Of course, we've been told that Isak can't play too many minutes back to back, so Ekitike's minutes will be slightly more nailed than Isak's, but there is still rotation there to be had as well. Nico O'Reilly got his goal in the Bernabeu. We spoke about him in the differential video in midweek. Was the face of the thumbnail for a reason. He really does tick along very nicely. Shame about the defensive points and the clean sheets not necessarily being there with him being a midfielder. But if he's getting on the pitch, and with Ryan Ait-Nouri going away after game week 15 to AFCON, I feel like his left back minutes might even be more secure than they already are. Anthony Gordon of Newcastle. Now, this is an interesting one for me. Yes, he did pick up, I think it was 24 points in game week 14, but there was 2 penalties. And yes, this is why we get players who are on penalties to take it. But I've seen Newcastle's predicted lineups for the time where Derby, and a lot of Newcastle fans actually want Harvey Barnes to play instead of Anthony Gordon. They think he offers a lot more to the lineup, and he's getting these penalties, which is the exact reason why I got him in. Well, sorry, I tell a lie. I got him in earlier in the season, and I was thankful that he was on the penalties at the time. But for you Voltemada owners, I think you can consider yourself very, very unlucky. Of course, we saw Voltemada's penalty, I think it was 4 or 5 game weeks back now, where he stuck it in the top corner. And with Anthony Gordon potentially getting some early substitutions, if these penalties just come a little bit later in the game, you will be hauling them points in. But for Anthony Gordon, he will rise 0.3. Of course, he's good for bonus points as well, but I can see some rotation in this Newcastle side coming up, especially with the Carabao Cup in midweek. Eddie Nketiah, Wharton and Yeremy Pino of Crystal Palace all scheduled to rise 0.3, which is a bit of a shame. We'll get to my team in the next segment, but all 3 players were very much on the watch list for a substitution chip. None of them were picked or chosen, and all 3 players did score exceptionally well. Eddie Nketiah got 25 points this week. Adam Wharton and Pino both started that Shelbourne game, surprisingly considering that there was a lot of rotation in that game. But you would believe that both players do get a lot of 90 minutes over the Christmas period. Although Oliver Glasner has come out and said he will make 11 changes between the Cups game, Cups, in the Conference League, and the following game against Leeds in the Premier League. So I wouldn't expect too many doubling players at all. Of course, he can split the team half and half, but with that victory last night, I think they only need one more win in the Conference League pretty much to finish in that top 8 position and guarantee him a straight through to the knockout rounds rather than the playoff round game. So for Palace, 0.3 rises for 3 assets. Quadruple on Tottenham as well. Richarlison, Romero, Vicario, and Xavi Simons all scheduled to rise 0.3 this week. Quite a few defensive options. Richarlison continues to pick up points, not looked at favourable by many people in the Sun Dream Team community, myself included. But since about, I'd say, game week 9 or so, he's scored really, really well. And for many of us who would have had Mateta in, or Mo Salah in my case, I think Richarlison's actually outscored him by quite some way. Defensive wise, Vicario, Romero, they picked up some clean sheets once again. We spoke about Van der Ven being the second most owned defensive asset in the game. He was down at 3.4 million. I'd expect him to rise a little bit as well. And finally, for the biggest risers ahead of game week 15 is Boubacar Kamara of Aston Villa. Got the assist against Arsenal, did really well as well in both fixtures this week. Villa on a very good form. Would I necessarily go for Boubacar Kamara when you've got other players such as Yuri Tielemans, who is doing really well since his return from injury? Probably not. But for that, they are the biggest price risers going into game week 15. I've already done this segment once and it had no audio, so I am back again. My team transfer plans going into game week 15. From game week 14, a bit of a sob story, 90 points overall, 1.6k in rank, but once again, it's another disappointing game week. And I spoke about it on X, but this game, Sun Dream Team specifically, lured me in last season because of the ability to watch your players in midweek. Of course, we play other games such as FPL and Champions League Fantasy, but specifically FPL. It's the biggest fantasy game, and to me, you watch your players normally on a Saturday and Sunday. Of course, you do have Monday and Friday fixtures occasionally. But for Sun Dream Team, one of the biggest lures towards this game was watching your players on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, on a Thursday. Someone who's a football fanatic like myself, I just can't watch enough football. And it adds an extra layer to watching those games. Watching out for my players, seeing if they're scoring points, and having that ups and downs along the way. With the game this season, specifically when the European competitions come around and the domestic cups, not necessarily when we have had the Premier League double a few game weeks back, that is the outlier. In the Premier League double a few game weeks back, no one was really rested. Phil Foden came up with, I think it was a 39 pointer across that game week when many of you played the goal boost. And I think the rotation has come in those other competitions, and it's kind of souring the game a little bit for me at the minute. I could have potentially had 6 Dublin players on Thursday. I could have had Munoz, Lacroix, Henderson, Williams, Rogers, and Mateta, because Mateta was my substitution in this week for Mo Salah. And even here, that was a 50-50 decision between Mateta and Eddie Nketiah. I went for Mateta over Nketiah. They was both brought off just after an hour against Fulham. I thought, okay, well, they're both going to play against Shelbourne, lots of points to be had there. Mateta was left behind in London, along with, of course, Daniel Munoz with his injury and a few other Palace players. Nketiah went on to get a 25 pointer this game week, so I've lost out on 22 points on the flip of a coin, basically. So to add to that, as well as every player on Thursday, bar Lacroix, either not starting or not being in the squad for their teams. Rogers was the only player that came on out of the rest of them. It just leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth with regards to these Dublin players. Someone like a Nico Williams is in my team, not necessarily because he's going to score 10 to 15 points in a game week, but because he will score between 4 and 7 points in a game week. And normally, if you're starting both in a game week, that will tot up over the season. Last year, I think we took not liability, that's not the word I'm looking for, but we took for granted players such as Bruno Fernandes and Kulusevski, because last season under Ange Postecoglou, he was the player that was playing the majority of minutes for Tottenham in I think it was the Europa League at the time, in the Premier League. Morgan Rogers as well for Aston Villa. We put him in our teams. He was a budget asset. He played the minutes and we just left him there. Cole Palmer, another player. Across the midfield and the attack in the 24-25 season for Sun Dream Team, we had Salah, we had Haaland, we had Bruno, we had Rogers. A lot of us had Kulusevski. And from 7 players in the attacking lineup, 5 of them were pretty much nailed week in, week out. And we chopped and changed those other 2. Of course, you didn't necessarily have those 5, but they did make up the bulk of the most teams. So where you gained the ground was in the defenders. If you could get a defender for a couple of weeks where the clean sheets were there to be had, you made a lot of rank. Now, as you can see by my team at the minute, Daniel Munoz was set to be my captain for Game Week 15. That's not going to be the case. Phil Foden was scheduled to be the vice captain as well. I didn't realise Marmoush went away to AFCON before the League Cup game, so I would have assumed Marmoush played up front and Haaland didn't play that fixture. I'm not as sure now. And I look at that Crystal Palace team. Glasner's come out and said Nathaniel Klein will start right back. You'd assume their back three will be Richards, Lacroix, Gay, and probably Mitchell at wing back. So it's still a pretty strong defensive lineup for Palace. But will Erling Haaland play that League Cup game in the week? Now, I'm speaking about rotation. Teams are rotating left, right, and centre. I've currently got Foden, Haaland, Malik Chow, Lacroix, and Henderson for this double game week in Game Week 15. Whether or not they all start is still yet to be seen. But there's not a lot of secrecy with regards to my transfers this week. Daniel Munoz and Mohamed Salah will both come out of my team. Who goes in is a big question. I'm losing faith with doubling players, and until Game Week 20, the League Cup teams only have one more fixture over the other teams. Do I go for reliability? Do I go for someone like Matheus Cunha or Bruno Fernandes, who's been heavily touted into people's teams? It's a possibility. Although Bruno isn't scheduled to go up 0.3 in price, which is why he didn't make the list, despite his 24-pointer, which was quite surprising. But Matheus Cunha, another player that we know well from Sun Dream Team last season, did really, really well at Wolves. And I think with the Sesko injury, Brian Mbeumo going off to AFCON, he will be a mainstay in that Manchester United attack. Also, Mason Mount is someone to note, slowly picking up points and getting into the Chelsea-like form that he was from many, many years ago. I think the most brought in player this game week will be Bruno Guimaraes. Sunderland away, Fulham at home. I think he does play both. I'm not 100% confident on it though. And if I bring in a player specifically for this double game week, I think he's more liable to get sent off against Sunderland than score in that game. It's going to be a very feisty one. You've already got Sunderland's social media team putting out compilations of full-blooded tackles and red card offences. So someone, in my opinion, will get sent off in that game. And with Joelinton not being on the pitch, more than likely, I think that burden will fall onto Bruno Guimaraes' shoulders. But maybe that's coping for maybe not bringing him in. I don't really want to go through any Crystal Palace assets. Oliver Glasner has said he will make 11 changes from the Conference League game to the fixture against Leeds. So from Game Week 15 to Game Week 16, I don't assume many will play both at all. So you're not necessarily gaining fixtures on that one. So I'm not going to be bringing in Mateta, especially after he's burned me this week. So across the board, it's not the easiest transfer-wise. Am I looking at a good double? Of course, the Brentford players do play twice. Not necessarily had the burden of European competitions to burn them out this season so far. So that might be an option. But you've got someone like Thiago. I spoke about Anthony Gordon in the last segment. Perhaps relying upon penalties. I think Thiago might be in that same bracket. Django Ataro will go away to AFCON, so he isn't an option. And Kevin Schade is banned in the Premier League fixture this week at home to Leeds, so he is also not an option. Maybe a Lewis Potter might be on the cards, but I think that's a bit of a rogue shout. So across the board, I haven't got 100% confidence in many teams at all, and it's a bit of a shame. The player that I probably would have liked to get in my team, because he's been scoring really well when he's been on the pitch, is Declan Rice. Wolves at home this week will play pretty much every minute over the Christmas period. You might get a few early substitutions for someone like a Mikel Moreno. But even Declan Rice has a little asterisk next to his name. Didn't play and didn't even travel for Club Brugge in the week. Maybe you can look at that and go, he's had a full rest. He's scored okay points-wise against Villa. And that might be the time to bring him in. So Declan Rice is being heavily considered. And as for the captaincy, Erling Haaland, do I stick it on him and just go with the ownership? Hopefully, my other players, ownership-wise, score the points and cover off the Erling Haaland base. Because if he does play in that Brentford game, I can see lots and lots of points this week. Crystal Palace not necessarily fully up to speed with regards to their best team being put out. Saw and Munoz down that right and side for them not being there. So Erling Haaland, Phil Foden, as I said, heavily under consideration for that armband. I think if anyone plays up front in that Brentford fixture, it will be Phil Foden. Marmoush goes away to AFCON. Phil Foden has played up front in the early rounds of the Carabao Cup. If he gets brought off after 60, 70 minutes against Palace, I'd fully expect him to start against Brentford, and that could be a massive point haul. But the armband, do you stick it on a doubler? In my team, 4 out my back 6 are doubling currently. Of course, Munoz isn't necessarily an option. I've only got 2 doubling attackers, and I'm not necessarily confident on Erling Haaland starting, so Saka might even be the option. I know it's a bit of a rogue shout, but Wolves at home, we saw how poor Wolves were at home to Manchester United on Monday night. Bruno Fernandes scored a 24 points in that one, and who's stopping Bukayo Saka doing the same? So, to me, the 2 players coming out, Daniel Munoz and Mohamed Salah. That does conclude my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 15 deadline. A disappointing Game Week 14, but of course the Christmas period does come thick and fast now. Plenty of fixtures. Hopefully we get more players out on the pitch, because the scoring wise and points wise it's been a little bit down recently. So let's get it bumped back up. Let's fly up the leaderboards and let's see if I can crack back into the top 1,000 without using one of the big chips. Leave a comment down below on if you've got any dilemmas with regards to your own teams, any transfer ideas, any transfers on your short list that you're not quite sure of. Normally, I'm down in the comment section replying to pretty much every comment. So if you see me, come along and say hi down there. If you have enjoyed today's content, do smash a thumbs up button. This is being recorded on the Friday, so this is the most up-to-date team news that we've currently got. So hit the thumbs up button. 100 is the target. Smash the subscribe button as well. We are on the road to 1,500. All the socials are down in the description below. We've got X, Instagram and TikTok. Go check it out. All the good stuff over there. So thank you very much for watching today's video, and you'll be seeing me in a new one very soon.